This press conference is being covered by a number of media outlets, and I'd like to thank everyone who's here today. It's being streamed live on the organizers' online platforms, namely the Cordoba Foundation, MEND, and the Muslim Association Britain. It's also being streamed live on some of the media outlets, including Al Jazeera Live, Sky News, Al Hiwar TV, and many others. So thank you very much for everyone. Now, to the main parts of today. First of all, my name is Anas Al-Tikriti. I'm the CEO and founder of the Cordoba Foundation, one of the organizers who have signed this press statement that will be given to you very, very shortly. The running order for today is quite simple, quite brief, and that is I'm going to read out the press statement, after which I will open the floor for your questions and answers. With me in the panel today are Lindsay Taylor, who's from MEND, representing MEND today. She's come all the way down from Glasgow. So thank you very much, Lindsay, for making it to London. Rubina is a victim of Islamophobia and Islamophobic attack. So Rubina, it's a great pleasure having you. She's a teacher and a community activist. And also we have Ahmed Zaidi, who's the president of the Muslim Association of Britain. We will be joined imminently, I am told, by someone who's representing the Nigerian Muslim Association. As soon as they arrive, I will introduce him or her. I'm not entirely sure who it will be. But that's the panel. So basically, I'm going to be reading the press statement, after which I will be opening the floor for questions and answers, and we'll agree on the format of how that takes place. So without further ado, and for immediate release, this press conference is organized by the Islamophobia Action Group. This is a group that has a number of Muslim organizations as well as community leaders who have come together in order to address this issue that is the topic of today, the concern of millions up and down the country. The reason why we have so much issues that are going on our streets up and down the country. And the press statement that was signed by 80 organizations and community leaders will be with you after I read the statement. And it is: in light of the recent far-right riots, 80 Muslim organizations and community leaders have come together to demand immediate and concrete action from the government to tackle the growing threat of Islamophobia. The alarming rise in hate and violence towards Muslims has exposed the dangerous normalization of Islamophobia in society, which fueled these attacks. The situation is critical. We call on the government to take the following urgent actions. 1. Adopt the APPG definition of Islamophobia. The government must officially adopt the APPG definition without delay to send a clear message that Islamophobia will not be tolerated. The normalization of anti-Muslim sentiment has been a key driver of the recent violence. 2. Launch an independent review. An independent investigation into far-right activities is urgently needed, focusing on the role of social media platforms, mainstream media, and political narratives in perpetuating hate and Islamophobia. 3. Engage with Muslim communities. The government must engage directly with legitimate, democratically elected representatives of the Muslim communities, particularly the Muslim Council of Britain, to ensure that Muslim voices are heard and addressed. Islamophobia has surged alarmingly in recent months, culminating in serious far-right attacks. It is essential that the government takes immediate steps to build a strong, collaborative relationship with Muslim communities, fostering unity and ensuring that all groups feel represented and heard. This is a pivotal moment. The time for action is now. A spokesman for the Islamophobia Action Group said, Islamophobia has fueled the recent far-right riots, and the consequences are clear and dangerous. The government must act now by adopting the APP definition of Islamophobia, investigate far-right activities, and engage directly with Muslim communities and their national representatives. This is a critical moment to address the root causes of hate and to protect our society. That's the end of the press statement. This statement will be readily available to all of you. And I'd like now to open the floor for questions and answers. If I may, whoever wishes to table a question, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, which organization you represent. If there is someone specific whom you wish to address your question to, please point them out. Otherwise, I will select from the panel to answer your questions. So anyone who wishes to ask a question? Yes, please.
I'm Nassim from the Middle East Monitor. So anyone that should answer the question. Why is there so much resistance from the government, the previous one, and the current one, to adopting the APP definition of Islamophobia?
So basically the question that Nassim from Memo is asking is, why is there so much resistance from this as well as the previous government to adopt the definition adopted by or presented by the APPG? Yeah, Lindsay, would you like to take this?
Definitely. My name is Lindsay Taylor. I'm from MEND, Muslim Engagement and Development. I think for Muslim communities, it's unclear why the government and the previous government is so averse to taking on a definition of Islamophobia. The definition was put together by the APPG group at Westminster Parliament. That's an all-party parliamentary group. Definition is quite simple and straightforward. Islamophobia is rooted in racism. It is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. It's a very straightforward, it's a very succinct definition. Now, all parties across the UK, barring the Conservative Party in England, and I say that in England because the Scottish Conservative Party have adopted the definition. So it's unclear in why the government would not adopt a definition which is there to protect not only Muslims, but those who are perceived to be Muslim. We know that many people from different faiths, different ethnicities, different backgrounds have also suffered Islamophobic attacks simply for being perceived to be Muslim. I think it has come to a point with the riots, with everything that has happened, that the government has to stop waiting to adopt this definition. They must act, and they must act now on tackling this issue.
Thank you very much. Yes, if you can introduce yourself. Can I have a roving mic here at the front, please? There's no need for a mic. Right, okay. Please go ahead. Just introduce yourself, your organisation.
My name is Wayne Bennett, and I'm the joint convener for Stand Up to Racism, and I bring solidarity and to this committee. And the question that I want to raise is, as well as supporting the original question about Islamophobia, is to talk about the new threat that we face. Does the panel agree the rise of reform and Farage in Parliament? We've had fascists and racists before, but they've never been legitimised by Parliament, represents a new threat to legitimising racism, and that we have to do something about it. And the second quick question that I would like to raise is, would we call the demonstrations that are together with solidarity with the Muslim community that stopped the fascists last time? And would the panel not agree that we were faced by terrorist racist attacks on our institutions, and that's what they should have been called? Yet that was ignored in terms of there was an attempt to murder people. If that had been a Muslim or somebody black that had done that, that's how it would have been treated, and that something should seriously be done. And those two things I think need to be urgently addressed. I'm sorry if I've done too long.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask those questions.
Thank you very much. Before I answer your question, I'd like to welcome Munir Ajayi, who's the president of the Council of Nigerian Muslim Organizations. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
If I may, I'm going to try to address the first question that you asked. racism is present in virtually every single human society. That is not the anomaly. The anomaly is when that minute minority of society becomes a predominantly influential and effective player in terms of deciding the narrative and deciding politics. That's when we have a problem. It's also problematic when the narrative of this extremist element in society becomes almost the official narrative of officials, in fact, of governments. That is when, the alarm bells start ringing. And I feel that over recent years, and, with successive prime ministers, I don't know whether socio-economic factors have played a role, but we have seen a gradual rise in the kind of narrative that expresses Islamophobic, xenophobic, racist generally, sentiments and undertones in the official policies as well as statements and narratives of authorities. That is, I believe, when things have become almost normalized. And this is what the likes of Baroness Saida Varsi, when she famously left the Conservative Party, citing the fact that Islamophobia has become something almost normal, talked about and talked with that kind of attitude at dinner tables across the country. I don't know, Lindsay, if you have anything to add here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I do think social economical issues have definitely played an impact. When people are at that point of fuel or food and poverty is a real issue, then they have to look for an out. They have to look for how they address the issues. And the government, I mean, we have to be honest, the successive governments that we've had have played into this rhetoric of Islamophobia, of blaming Muslims, of demonising Muslims. And as you've said, when we look at the riots, when we look at what happened, the mosque where it started, and I don't know if you've all seen the CCTV images that came from that mosque. There was individuals trapped in that mosque from 9 in the morning until 12 at night, well, thugs. And that's the only way that we can express it, is thugs, extremists, were trying to set fire to that mosque. We then saw them doing exactly the same in some of the hotels where refugee and asylum seekers were based. We heard stories of refugee and asylum seekers choosing to sleep outside rather than going back into the hotels because of fear. We've also heard the stories of individuals fearing to leave their homes, fearing to go into society, fearing to go out and about and do their everyday business because of these riots. These are something that happened in our streets in Britain, something that many people from Britain would turn around and say, we would never see something like this here in Britain. We could never have something like this happen in Britain. But let's be completely honest, it's happened. It didn't come from nowhere. It came from successive governments, their negative rhetoric around Islamophobia, their negative rhetoric around people of different ethnicities. It also came from the media. Like, we have to be honest, and we have to look at the part that different people, different establishments, different areas have played in getting us to where we are today. Now, what we need to look at is, how do we fix that? How do we move forward from that? And the way that we move forward from that is engagement. Engagement with mainstream, democratically elected Muslim community groups and other community groups. This is vitally important that we take this seriously. We have got to the point where individuals, and actually we were at this point a while ago when we look at the Scottish Government report that came out in 2018 around Islamophobia. It highlighted the fact that 86.5% of all Muslims had faced Islamophobia in Scotland, and that many of them had changed their daily routines or feared to go out and about in their daily business. We have lived like this for some time, and now we have to look at, this is where we have gotten because we have not addressed this previously. We have not interacted with this previously in an appropriate manner. You know, as Dr. Anis said, Islamophobia passes the dinner table test now. So how do we change this narrative and this rhetoric? It's by the government that we currently have in place actually engaging appropriately and properly with mainstream Muslim organisations and coming to a solution and actually working to change this negative rhetoric.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Imran Mullah from the Middle East side. I have a question. You twice, once in the statement and then you said it just now, urged the government to engage with mainstream, democratically elected Muslim organisations. Can you just expand on what you mean by democratically elected, and why that's important and why you think it hasn't happened so far?
If I'll say something, and maybe anyone who wants to also. I mean, this has been ongoing since I became active more than 25, 30 years ago. This kind of, if I'm allowed to generalize slightly, this kind of childish attitude from successive governments in regards with we will only talk to whomever we like. That's something that is that goes against the best interest of governments. It goes against the best interest of the country. It goes against the best interest of the kind of relations that we need to foster between society, between people and authorities, political and otherwise. And unfortunately, this has gone on for far, far too long. I'm old enough to recall the government saying, well, you marched against the war in Iraq in 2002 and 2003. We will disengage and we won't talk with you. We'll set up our own group of people who seem to be or appear to be Muslim, and we will talk with them and give the appearance that we are engaging with the Muslim community. It doesn't work like that. The organizations we're talking about, and in the statement we specifically mentioned the MCB, the Muslim Council of Britain, is the biggest umbrella organization in the country. It's a democratically representative organization. And every 2 years, there's an election call, there are AGMs, and it's just like an organization ought to be run. Now that organization, whether it adopts certain positions and opinions that displease the government or otherwise, are neither here nor there. And they shouldn't figure in a society that claims to be run by democracy and by the multitude of opinions and standpoints in regards with quite complex issues, whether national or international. And therefore, the position in regards with talking and engaging with true representatives, and by the way, successive governments, and I could list a catalogue of attempts by various governments where certain platforms were funded quite generously and given airtime on media and the such, and ultimately ended up with nothing and achieving nothing whatsoever. So I think it's about time that someone in this new government to say, listen, for the past 25 years, and particularly since 9/11, 2001 and the adoption of the new terrorism laws, we haven't made any ground. We haven't progressed. Things have gotten bit by bit worse for everyone. And now we are in a situation where once again, racism has returned to our streets. That's something that needs courage and needs principle on behalf of our government to say, we have had enough, we've tried everything, we need now to go back to what everyone understands, and that is the Muslim community electing through its various organizations and platforms, electing its representatives in order to present their interests and to speak to authority. And we don't need a one singular person or platform that represents the 6% or 7% of British Muslims. We don't need that. What we do need is a government that is brave enough and that is principled enough to see that Muslim views are just like everyone else's views. They are varied, they are different, but they are important and relevant. And to shut them off and say, I'm just going to disengage, is to the detriment of governments, not necessarily to the detriment of the Muslim community itself. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that. Okay. Yes.
James Gorman, Sky News.
What engagement, if any, have you had from the new Labour government since the riots have taken place? And secondly, if you touched on social media in the independent review, clearly that played a big role in what we've recently seen. Are you calling on them to take any action or make any changes?
So far we haven't had any official or real engagement with the UK government, and I think, and I say the UK government because I am based in Scotland, and I think it's important to differentiate, because the Scottish government, as soon as the riots happened, actually the First Minister in Scotland called a meeting with Muslim individuals who represent different organisations to come together to talk, and we haven't had many issues up in Scotland. But he wanted to make sure that he was getting ahead of any issues, making sure that he was reassuring the community and making sure that he was having conversations with the community and different representatives. There has since been subsequent meetings with the First Minister in Scotland. I know that there's been similar actions happening down in Wales and also in Northern Ireland. So I think that's a stark contrast of what we've seen coming out of Westminster, that there has not been official engagement, there has not been engagement with the Prime Minister. And I think it's really important when a community is being targeted, when a community is being used as a scapegoat for other issues, that actually there should be proper engagement. You know, Muslim Council of Britain, as Muslim Council of Britain, should have invited to Westminster to have these conversations, as should other organisations which engage and work with and represent the Muslim community. So unfortunately there hasn't been any real communication or any real interaction. And sorry, what was your second question again?
It was on social media firms and whether you would call for any change in policy for them, given how much of an impact social media had in the recent events.
Definitely. I mean, MEND as an organisation has always called for interaction with social media and making sure that they are properly regulated and there are proper things in place and that they are addressed. And part of the review that we're asking for would be also to review social media and look at what happened there and how that did manage to fuel the flames in such a horrendous way, where people were stuck in hotels while they were being set alight. I mean, we could see that on the news. On the top floor, we could see individuals standing inside those hotels. We also heard stories of staff who were in those hotels locking themselves in rooms and barricading the door in order to escape because they feared for their life. So I think it is incredibly important that any review and all reviews that happen include taking social media into account and looking at that. Also looking at the media and how the media interacted in those instances as well.
If I may just add to this, I think that the recent riots have proven 2 points at least. The first is this need to regulate social media. I mean, the misinformation, unfortunately, that social media is today awash with, the implications are real. The implications are serious. The implication could potentially cost lives. And this is how seriously we should approach this particular issue. The second is that the statements that are sometimes flippantly issued by people in authority, people whom people look up to, trust, listen to, hear out and such, and act based upon what they hear, they matter. These things matter. For decades now, successive governments, upon trying to explain away their economic, security, political failures, have found easy answers in migrants and immigration, in Islamic terrorism, in this and that, and this is the outcome of which we saw with our own eyes. We heard the chants. It's Muslims and it's immigrants. Those are the two things that people are hearing from their representatives, from government officials, from political figures that ought to know better for years now, that it's either Muslims and Islamic terrorism or it's migrants, and now it's come to play. So these things matter, and I think it's important that any kind of review takes these on board. Yes, Robina, would you like to say something? I'll come back to you.
Hi, so my name is Rabina Rahman. I'm a teacher in London. Just to add to what Anas Al-Tukwiti said, the rhetoric that comes out from the government has real-life consequences. When my group of 6 people were just minding our own business, coming back from a protest, we were met by a very racist, very violent man who started talking about Palestine and Israel out of the blue. Approached us, started talking about it. Initially, I couldn't hear what he was saying. I was talking to my friend, so I thought he was just harassing her. So I said, "Go away, I just want to talk to you." Then he got louder and louder and louder. So I'm talking about Israel and Palestine. A lot of misinformation there, largely from our government, the Reform Party, Britain First, Talk TV, GB News, the same sort of stuff you hear on those channels from those people. He was coming out with it, very, very angry. He'd never met us before, but the anger on his face was very real. Now, I knew he'd been misinformed, and there was no way of calming him down. But he was ready to hit any of us, and particularly the ones who were wearing keffiyehs, because that's what drew him to us, because we were wearing keffiyehs. He started on about the protests, because the government at that time, in April, were calling them Hamas protests, terrorist protests, anti-Semitic protests. So that's the line that he came with to then attack us. But it very quickly became loads of Islamophobic, vile language that I won't repeat. So again, the things that government ministers say, the things that are allowed in the media, the things that journalists are allowed to say, like Talk TV, GB News, it has real life consequences. It affects people out on the street. And when the riots happened, I knew in a way that this was coming, because of what the media has been saying, what our government ministers have been saying, and been saying without any consequences. It has become normalised. Islamophobic language has become normalised. And for him, he felt he was completely in the right. And if it wasn't videoed and it had not gone viral, he would not have been convicted. And I'm 100% sure of that. I don't know what the statistics are of the Islamophobic hate crimes, but I know for a fact, from my experience, that it's much, much higher. Because out of the 6 of us, only 2 of us went forward to have him convicted. And that was a very difficult process. It was a process of chasing the police, being passed through 3 different police organisations, victim support, some others, just to find out. We just wanted to know what we had to do as victims to make sure he was convicted. To the point that I reached out to a friend from the legal field to ask him, what do I do? I'm not being heard. Our names were published in the paper as well, which again made people fearful of going forward, because we felt that he had just come from a Britain First or Reform Party meeting, the way he was talking to us, so we felt he was quite political. So the group felt quite nervous going forward, and the lack of support from the police initially was absolutely unacceptable, considering what we'd been put through and the fact that it had gone viral and made us all feel very unsafe. So we did manage to go forward, and my friend referred me to the Islamophobia Response Unit, which were absolutely amazing. They helped me bring it up to the CPS. The CPS transferred it to the Met Hate Crime Unit, and the Met Hate Crime Unit were absolutely brilliant at dealing with our case. They listened to us. We got a victim support statement out, which we wouldn't have done, because we didn't know what to do for the lack of support from the police. And Tal Mama appeared in court on our behalf as well. But that was all because of our advocacy. We didn't get the help that we needed. And there are laws in place to convict these people, but they're just not taken seriously. The government ministers aren't taking Islamophobia seriously. Police will not take it seriously. Victim support will not take it seriously. The media will not take it seriously. It's important that it comes from the top, that our government ministers are making sure the police do take Islamophobic reports seriously, because when we called the police, we waited. No one turned up. The police did not turn up. I was sent a text to contact 101. I contacted 101, and because it had gone viral by then I was called by the police, and then they said that there was a misunderstanding, between different police stations or something, and then they wanted our statement. But even after giving our statement, there was still, I think I just talked about this. Even after giving our statement, he appeared in court on the third day after the incident. We were not told that he was appearing in court, and again, the Daily Mail had published our names. He'd been given an excuse in the Daily Mail, quoted from us apparently that he was drunk. None of us said he was drunk. He came right up to my face. He didn't smell of alcohol, but it was just a lot of misinformation, not much information coming to the victims. And we could have easily just pulled out and said, we can't deal with this, because it was a very stressful 4 weeks to make sure he got convicted. He got a suspended 12-week sentence, and there was some sort of support, 3-month support for his dependency on alcohol. But I know for a fact, after what I went through, that many people do not report. And since what I went through, I've heard of other attacks happening and people saying, I'm not going to report. And these are attacks where people have actually been physically hit, and they still have not gone to the police, because the hassle of going to the police is so difficult to be taken seriously. It's so difficult. If you don't have video or recording, again, it's a huge burden on the victim, and without much support, victims just pull out. So I really, really strongly want to stress that if our government ministers are not taking Islamophobia seriously, the rest of society will not take it seriously either.
Thank you very much, Rubina. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Mary Ismail from Islam Channel. I have a couple of questions, if I may. So the first one, how do you see the response of the present government to the recent violence from the far right so far? And do you think there is hopes that this present government will perform better in terms of tackling the Islamophobia and racism at all levels than the previous governments? And then, do you have any plans to for serious discussions with the government officials, with police, to make our institutions safer, our streets safer against Islamophobia?
If I may, and I'll come to you, Lindsay, but I have to say that the initial statements made by the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary were positive. I mean, we saw them as being positive, being helpful, and we took them as such. And I think that the speedy process of people standing before courts and then being sentenced, that also helped to send a message that might deter others from, going on the same criminal path as those who were convicted. Of course, that was then followed by the farce regarding our prisons and the space within prisons, and now it's changed into a political sort of discussion regarding who wasted what money in terms of allowing for prisons to have sufficient cells and spaces, all the such. So in a way, it was lost a little bit in subsequent days. However, the question that you ask is what we thought of the responses. The responses we thought were positive, and they were just what we needed. Secondly, do we have hope? Of course, we always have hope, and we always reach out to governments. And at the same time, we criticize when they are caught failing. That's absolutely, how things should be. But in terms of the third question, I think this is quite important. The first is that these riots, whilst Muslims were the main target and Islamophobia was the main element and driver, it's important to recognize that this is a threat to all of society. Everyone is in danger if this is allowed to run free, run loose, excuse the pun, riot. And this is why it is crucial. And those 80 organizations who have signed the statement that I read at the very beginning, all of them insist that whilst, yes, Muslims are the main targets of these racists, but ultimately speaking, this is a problem that all of society needs to deal with. And we need to recognize, and the story of Rubina Rahman and her friends is something that we all need to take stock of, because it speaks of not only society, but it talks of the media as well as then the justice system, the criminal system. and the failings within those structures that allow people to be victimized, yet be so intimidated and so deterred from proceeding with trying to gain back their rights. That is a problem for everyone. And of course, the police have to ensure the security and safety of everyone. But I feel that the political failings are of such, and one of them is the admittance, like I said, for successive governments, and I'm not just talking about the Conservatives or Labour or the such, successive governments, constantly hanging their failures, economic, social, security, political, whatever, on the weakest link, the easiest, the softest of touches within our society, on Muslims, on immigrants and the such, and absolving themselves of any blame is problematic to the extreme. This needs to be addressed, and I'm yearning for a government that is brave enough to say, listen, we got it wrong. We just need to do things differently. And here we are here to highlight this. Any other questions? Yes, sir. If you can introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Faiz Hassan. I'm from the Green Party. So not the media, so apologies for that. So when the riots happened, the Prime Minister said that the police will crack down on the rioters, etc. But there was also a massive outpouring of support where the anti-racist marches and gatherings were 100 times, 1,000 times bigger than racist marches. Going forward, how would you want to combat sort of similar riots? Do you want this to be a police issue, or do you want an outpouring of support amongst the community as well?
Very good, thank you. Lindsay.
I think there is a whole range of ways to tackle these issues. I work for an organisation who is based around training, based around outreach work, based around working with everybody within the community. And I think that this is what we need to do. We need to engage with everyone in the community. Now, we saw things like in Liverpool, we saw where people came together from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all ages, coming together to say, actually, we stand against these riots. These riots are not in our name. They do not represent us. The people who are doing these actions are not representing us. In a town where the 3 young girls were tragically murdered, where this all started, the community, the day after the mosque was attacked, came together and said, this is not representative of our town. This is not representative of our people. And they helped to rebuild the broken walls and the shattered windows, and help to support the community who had been through tragedy. Now, this is how we tackle these issues. We come together as society, we come together as a community, and we say, actually, no, this small minority of people who are running rampage through our towns do not represent us. But it is because of the rhetoric that we have been living in for the last couple of decades that's allowed these people to feel emboldened that actually that it's okay and that it's normal and that it's acceptable to run through our towns, looting and rampaging and attacking the most vulnerable in our society. Imagine fleeing a country of war. Imagine fleeing discrimination. Imagine fleeing hate in your own country and coming somewhere else for safe refuge and then being attacked. Being in a building that's being set fire to, being in a building where people are breaking down the doors. Imagine being in that. You can't even begin to imagine how that must feel. We have a duty for individuals to safeguard them, to support them, and to make them feel protected. Not to allow thugs to run around the street and make people feel nervous. I know of so many stories of people who don't want to go out. They don't want to leave their homes. And this is men and women. They don't want to go about their everyday business because of what has happened. But I also hear stories of solidarity. I hear stories of support. I hear stories of people, coming together, taking actions. I saw the pictures of one or two thugs standing in a street and thousands of individuals standing saying, we don't stand for this. They were not violent. They were not intimidating. They were not scary. They were there to say, we stand in solidarity with minorities. We stand in solidarity with Muslims. This is what we need to see more of. We need to see the fact that mainstream society, we need to see the government, we need to see civic society coming out and saying we stand in solidarity against hate.
I think it's one thing about Britain is that which you just described, the fact that the overwhelming majority of society know right from wrong. They recognize right from wrong. And that has been the hallmark of, whether it be the anti-war protests, whether it be, the past 11 months, the demonstrations and the events happening around the Gaza genocide and the such. Britain has shown itself in its true colors in those that have stood side by side, shoulder to shoulder, with their Muslim brothers and sisters and neighbors, and said, we will not have what these people, this minute minority, but which is given a far bigger platform than it deserves, and a far, bigger microphone than it credits. Only a few days ago, I was reading about the Brick Lane riots back in the 70s. And, that is something that is part of our history as a society, as a nation, which we ought to teach to our children, which we ought to herald as being the real Britain, the real face of British society. It fills me with joy and pride. I was at one of those in Harrow, where the far right threatened to come on that particular day about 3 weeks ago. And the turnout of friends, of people of all colors, of all creeds, of all backgrounds, coming to stand by their brothers. And when no one turned out, someone said, listen, there's a mosque down the road, let's go and make sure that no one threatens that mosque. And they went and, safeguarded the mosques and people coming in and going out. That is what I wish we could spend more time talking about. Unfortunately, we have to eradicate the cancer from within our midst. It's something we can do. We just need the very clear and unequivocal stand of our authorities, political, security, as well as the justice system. And I believe that fight is a sure win. We just need to be determined. Ahmed, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing. So within our organizations, we've seen a lot of support from the community. Like you mentioned, the protests were much, much bigger than the racist ones and Islamophobic ones. This has been great for us. It showed really what Britain is made of and our communities. However, this cannot continue to be just a community effort. The government must get involved and must have a clear position, a clear stance. And this is why we're here. We're here to make sure that the Muslim community voice is heard, and there is a way forward to tackle this critical issue that's not just affecting Muslims, might be affecting some communities at the moment, but this is just a bigger problem in the making.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. I am going to take the sister at the back. Yes, if you can introduce yourself.
Sophia Jama, CEO of the Inclusive also an independent peace advisor and a part of the counter-terrorism advisory group at Scotland Yard. Just going back to what you said about Brick Lane, I grew up in Town, but there were times in the weekend where we weren't allowed to go out because we knew that the BNP were out, and so it was a safety issue. I think definitely as a Muslim, hijab and women face challenges, and definitely the impact that this has had in terms of trauma, bringing back old trauma, but also knowing that we could not go certain areas of the UK during this period of time. And also we know that it really highlighted what I would only call an iceberg. There's a deeper problem. What we saw, well, I guess the deeper problem is what's happening around the world, the government and the institutional problems that we've had. And I know that not all the people that have these negative behaviours, and behaviours must be challenged and consequences must take place in order for us to see the change. As a black, community, I wonder to the Nigerian Council, what impact have you seen in the black community? Because we have layers, being black and obviously being Muslim as well.
Over to you, Munir.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Munir Ajayi. Extraction of the Nigerian Muslim under the aegis of MCB. Yeah, a lot of issues in the community comes up, and we struggle many times to see how much is being addressed about all the fallouts in terms of maybe attacks or I mean a lot of abuses here and there. But I think what we've done in the local borough, especially in the middle of Greenwich and maybe Bisham community, we've tried a lot to see how we can engage the authorities there. And of course, they've been it's very supportive in a way. And we cannot, I mean, totally agree that we are there yet. We're definitely not there. A lot can still be done, but we have pockets of these issues around that is drawing concerns to us. I mean, and if you ask me, I'm just like my co-panelists here have addressed. All we want to see is that, first of all, I think it's important to thank the Prime Minister for his pronouncements. I mean, the wake of this past protests and all the throw-ups. But what can still be done? I mean, it's a new government, it's a new time, and a new moment. And I think for the government to enjoy this engagement and kind of togetherness and diversity which Britain professor, which we all believe in, it is important to plow back, look back, and then engage especially the Muslims, and then through the MCB, if sessions like this are being organized, I'm sure they're also listening to us now, they can see how pained we are as Muslims. And so as a part of the bigger community, we want to see much push into this engagement continually, for that matter.
Thank you very much. Yes, the gentleman there at the back, and we'll try to wrap up in a few minutes' time. Yes, please. Introduce yourself first.
Yes, my name is Sadiq Ahmad. I'm representing Muslim Association, Muslim Community Association. I mean, it brings me the memories back in the early 80s. I grew up in the homeless, like the sister. The BNP used to come down, Brick Lane, marching. It was called National Front.
Yes.
And used to come out, protesting. It was the whole community. It used to come out. But my question is to Sister Rabina Ahmed. You mentioned about out of 6 individuals, 4 people decided to take it further after this traumatic experience you had. There are 4 chose not to understand. That is really, really painful. They don't go to take it further. How can we support people like that, who, after being victimized, they feel threatened and scared to take the matter further? As a community, how can we support them? Is there a community support system? We can go out and tell people, look, don't get scared. There is a support system available.
I think in our situation, before they didn't take it further, they had their own experience of Islamophobia and racism, because we were not all Muslims. We were a very mixed group of people. One of the group was white as well and male. But they just felt, from everything that they've heard already, nothing's going to happen. And I think that was compounded by the fact the police didn't even turn up. And we waited and waited and waited. And then the text message, call 101, we did that, and then we all went to the police station the next day to write a statement. It was not taken seriously, even though by that time it had gone viral. They didn't know why we were there. We had to explain what had happened. And then we just left feeling really disheartened. And again, people were saying, why are we bothering? They're not going to do anything. But my experience on that day was, I just felt that he was capable of doing some serious harm to someone. And even though we were in a busy shopping centre, there were 6 of us, he could easily attack someone down an alleyway by themselves. Maybe he has. I mean, he had previous convictions. They had found him from the recording using face recognition, so he has previous convictions. But I just felt that he was going to do something more serious. And my friend and I, who were probably the most targeted by him, just felt that we had to take it further. And I think we could have easily just shrugged our shoulders and say, no, we're not. But we asked for victim support on that day when we all went to the police station. None was given. I think a lot of it has to do with government ministers taking it seriously, and then the police then taking it seriously, and not having to wait for a video to go, a recording to go viral before, you know, police have pressure put on them to take it seriously.
Thank you, Robina.
Is
Lindsay?
that consistent within the Muslim community? So that,
There's the Islamophobic response unit.
So
I think
there's,
they're brilliant.
yeah, the Islamophobia Response Unit is an organisation that was set up to support individual victims of Islamophobia. In the last 12 months, they have recorded that Islamophobia has increased by 365%, and that is not going down. That's a statistic of people who are reporting. And I think, you know, the sister has highlighted only 2 out of the 6 reported. And this is what we need to think about, is the fact that if Islamophobia has gone up by 365%, how many are not reporting? How many are not actually going to the police because they don't feel they'll be taken seriously, because they don't feel that something will happen? I would encourage anybody who is the victim of any form of hate crime, reports it to the police, because if they don't have the stats, if they don't have the numbers, then actually they can't deal with it in the same way. But also, the police's job is to find the individuals who have committed a crime against you. It's really important that we do report, because hopefully justice will then be served. There's also organisations like MEND and MAB who are also there working on Islamophobia and tackling the issues. There have been instances up and down the country where MEND has responded to those instances, supported community members, supported individuals, and made sure that the police take it seriously, made sure that organisations take it seriously, and actually helped the victim throughout the whole process to make sure that there is some form of justice is served at the end of the day. But that's not the way it should happen. We shouldn't have to have organisations there to ensure that justice is served. We shouldn't have to have organisations that are there to say to the police and to say to figures of authority, actually, this is Islamophobia, this is a real issue, and you must take it seriously. The police should be doing that automatically. The government should be doing that automatically. They need to work harder to ensure that it's taken seriously and to actually interact with the victims of Islamophobia. I heard a story recently about the riots that had happened previously, things like Brick Lane and so on. It was an individual who had moved from England to Scotland in order to escape those riots. They were re-traumatised by what was happening now. And this is what we need to remember. When Muslims are facing Islamophobia on a daily basis, we are creating a community who are continuously traumatised by what is going on around us. The fact that what has happened in the last couple of weeks, in the last month, the riots, has meant that we have a community who are being re-traumatised to a horrendous degree. We need to think how that's going to affect the future, how that's going to affect individuals. But it's not just Muslims who are being traumatised. We have all lived through this. We have lived through the riots now, and we have lived through the previous riots. We need to do more within our society to bring this to an end.
Thank you very much. The last question I'll take from the lady. Yes. You can introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Athena, I'm from The Independent. I just wanted to ask for a bit more information on the independent review that you guys are calling for. Can you expand a bit more on what you hope to come from that? What you hope to cover? I know you said social media, but is there anything else?
What we're really looking for is for the government to look into why the riots happened. They didn't, as I've already said, they did not come from nowhere. The riots have come through media, political, civic society, rhetoric that has gone on for decades now. So we want an independent review to look into this, to look into why this happened and how we can work to stop it happening in future. We want the government to look inward, look at themselves, and look at actually the parts that they can do to change the future to make sure again that this doesn't happen again. We also want them to address media. We want them to address social media. We want them to address all the different facets of society that are failing our community. But not just our community, other communities as well. Communities across the UK are being failed just now. The review has to look at all of this, and it has to come to a real outcomes and real steps that we can actually take, practical steps that can be taken to move forward in a positive and productive way. At the end of the day, the riots have happened. We now need to look at the positivities of how we can move forward in a positive way. We're hoping that a review will look at all of these issues, address all of the problems, and then look at practical steps.
Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll wrap this up. just a few things on your way out, the press release, as well as the signatories. Are they available as well? The 80 signatories. Also, any media inquiries or interviews or the such, please speak to Abdullah Khalid. He'll arrange with either panelists or anyone from the guests today. And look out for the recording of this press conference and follow-up work on the platforms of organizations around here, such as MAB, BAND, the Cordoba Foundation, and the others. Thank you very much for turning up today. Thank you.